Right, good afternoon everyone. Welcome to this board meeting of Ebbsfleet Development Corporation, where drivers have made it here to Ebbsfleet today despite the travel disruption, the rail strike, so it's great to be here in person. So we have a busy agenda today. We'll be recording this and this will go on our website after the meeting has concluded. We have no members of the public. You are always very welcome to join us here at our offices here. Perhaps in the future, it'd be great to see you here. Can we just start with apologies for absence, please?
Yes, so we have apologies today from two new board members, Valerie Owen and Fred Marudis. We are expecting Lord Moylan to join us shortly.
Great. Can I just check on that? Very short notice, their appointment, and of course it's difficult for them to schedule their diaries. Is there any way that we can give them a free pass on not having made this board meeting as opposed to it showing up in our
Yes, I'm sure of course.
We'll use our discretion there, Chair, then that's fine.
I think people do look at attendance, so I think it's a bit severe on them given a few days' notice that they've been appointed. Yeah. Lord Moylan, Daniel, good to see you as always. Do we have any declarations of interest other than the standing declarations of interest which relate to members of the planning committee? No? All right, good. Then we have our part one minutes of our last board meeting, which was on the 22nd of June this year. As always, a very fulsome set of minutes. Can I just ask whether people are happy that those are a true and fair record of the meeting that took place? So they are approved? Yes. Great, thank you very much for that, everyone. Then we have our action list. James, unless you want to highlight anything which is particularly sensitive, we appear to be making good progress there. Is there anything you or Ian would like to highlight there?
Simon, I'd just like to say in respect of the first one, 0105, this was us having a look at the potential letting of part of the first floor space. I will bring something in my paper in September on that.
All right, thank you very much for that. Good.
And on the final one, 0905, this was looking at the topographical model. We've been looking at this in some detail. We shared a little bit of information. Jen did with Nick earlier in the week, and we'll probably have a conversation with Nick outside, I think, Nick, rather than now, just on your thoughts about that. So you may already have done that today, but.
All right. Thank you, Ian. Thank you for that. So I think that is our actions there. It's slightly, and we have our forward plan as well, slightly changed the running order. We have a late paper which relates to appointments onto our various panels and committees, which we'll bring after your part one report, Ian. A couple of other things. I would like to take the opportunity of congratulating our new non-executive director appointments, Simon Blanchflower. Simon is here in person. Fred Marudis and Valerie Owen, given the short time frames I suggested since their appointment letters were received from the department, have been unable to make it, but they are busy reading into everything, and I'm sure they'll be here at the next meeting. So I'd also like to just minute and thank the department and the appointments team at the department for the very thorough process they did. All three appointments, have approval and the blessing of number 10. So Cabinet Office, so highly important appointments, and it's great that they have been able to join the board to bring their expertise to make sure that we create a wonderful place here. So
hello, Simon, can I say?
Hello, Daniel. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you after such a long time.
You clearly know each other. Anyway, welcome. Another thing, just wanted a minute. I think some congratulations, Mark. I think didn't do it last time, but you've been appointed Director of Planning and Place. So Mark Pullen, congratulations on that. And from the 1st of August, Jen Hunt, you are becoming Director of Development. So well done, Jen. So well done to Mark and Jen. Both highly valued and skilled members of the team there. So it's great that they.
Could I ask why everyone's career is steaming ahead except for mine?
you are well known for your success and your role in the local community.
Jeremy, aren't you on that list we keep hearing about, or one of those two lists? We're constantly expecting you to emerge.
Oh yes, I'm sure something somewhere.
Yeah. An upgrade from the MBA. Let's hope you get that. So anyway, then we move on to the first paper, which is Ian, Chief Executive's strategic report. Perhaps you can take us through that.
Thank you, Simon. Firstly, just like to add my welcome from the executive's perspective for our new non-executive members. I have had a chance to have a chat with Simon, Valerie, and Fred. We're very much looking forward to working with you. We've organised a tour today as well for you to all to come over and have a thorough look over the area. So very much looking forward to that, and would offer my congratulations to those staff appointments that you mentioned just now. So congratulations to Jen on her appointment. In terms of other things on my report, in terms of the business plan, as this says, we are still working on a draft plan. We have agreed with the department. The department have agreed with us that we shouldn't publish a plan until we do have our full capital allocation. So we'll continue to bear that in mind. In the meantime, we will work with a draft set of priorities that the board considered last time. At item 5, I've just set out a little bit of detail on some announcements. Well, not announcements, because I think they chose not to announce it specifically, Eurostar, but information that was fed back to us, the decisions by Eurostar about stopping at Ebbsfleet and elsewhere in Kent. So a longer delay there than we'd hoped for. We will continue to talk to Eurostar. I think that's really important. We've had a number of meetings with them over the last couple of years during the pandemic to understand their plans and really ensure that they are aware of our plans at Ebbsfleet and the potential and the growth that will happen there. And of course, if there is any broader I was going to say lobbying, but influence that can be brought to bear by elsewhere in Kent, then we will obviously add our support to that. So we do obviously consider stopping services at Ebbsfleet on Eurostar to be very important to us and our aspirations for Ebbsfleet Central. I think Simon wasn't planning to add anything else other than those things, but happy to take any questions as usual.
Yeah, look, absolutely. I think it would be within the remit of what we can say in part 1, the point which relates to Eurostar. Clearly, the surface car parking around Ebbsfleet Central, the extent to which there isn't a Eurostar stopping service from Ebbsfleet International, that is likely to change the requirement for parking numbers and therefore the compensation which we would have. I don't know, Jen, whether there's, you can just make sure that people are aware of that dynamic. It's not all bad news actually about Eurostar. So yeah, perhaps you can.
Yeah, no, of course. So we are, as ever, constantly engaged with the Department of Transport and High Speed 1 over the reprovision of car parking, as is the requirement in order to effectively. We've always agreed with them that at the point that we need to do that, we will look at the usage of the car parks and make sure that what we reprovide is, aligned with the usage. And it is evident when you look on site even now that is over provision. There's an over provision anyway. And of course, if in these next couple of years, depending on the decisions of Eurostar, any of those decisions can be fed into those discussions. So very much on our.
Absolutely. I think the point that you've made. That the initial agreements that we have with them relate to that which is commuter transportation and local parking need. And that fans out from there, that would be more the longer stay international parking. So the extent to which there isn't the same amount of demand for that, there wouldn't be the same requirement to reprovide that. Would also have implications for Ebbsfleet Central West as well, and what can go there. So every every cloud has a silver lining. So I think it's, yes, Nick, can I bring you in?
So I think this is a question for Julia and Thames Way, Blue Lake restoration, cost mitigation. You are in a perfect eye of the storm. And I don't think the industry really thinks that this is a new normal. Cement going from 500 to 1,200 pounds a tonne. That cannot last. So I'm just concerned, or would like to hear from your thoughts as to actually too many decisions where when rebar's going up 75% in cement's 50 or 40% at least, etc. And thoughts.
So clearly we're monitoring for every project what's happening. I think we've got a series of papers in part 2 that will go through some of the detail. I think every project, what we've done within the investment plan, when and if we get our budget from DLUC, the full budget, we've allocated a portion in that to inflationary risk at the moment. But what we need to do is go through each project that we've got, which has got a previous business case approval or we're looking at, and look at what risks we've got in there depending on what type of product. I think we need to do it very methodically and in a very structured manner so that we take it project by project and assess that risk that we've got, because at the moment we're looking at risk and contingency way above anything in the HMT guidance documents. I've been looking at projects this week with Jen where we're seeing 36 to 200% increases in cost. Outside of Ebbsfleet, we've been looking across the industry at what's happening. So I'd say we're very closely in contact with the Construction Leadership Council, monitoring the prices, and we get good intelligence from our consultant team. We're going to take that approach step by step as we move forward as to which projects are adversely affected and which ones aren't. So,
but is the thought that in your mindset that we probably haven't reached the peak yet, but naturally as numerous projects stop, the reality is that prices will come. It's just that what our decision thought processes are on priorities and which projects are most exposed. Actually thinking about that in the context of our decision tree or priority. Blue Lake, you've got a hole in the lake. And cement is your key issue.
yeah, I mean, clearly any of our projects are going to, the majority of them have all got steel in, they've all got concrete in. It's not only those products, it's M&E equipment is a particular issue. So if we look at anything which is a building, we've got issues. So I think what we're going to do is take it in a very structured way and look at what materials and what risks are in individual projects, because they are all so varied that we need to just do it in this very methodical way and look at what risks we originally budgeted for and whether that's significantly changed, and that's the route we prefer to follow, so that we're not rash in any decision making as we move forward. We are seeing some things stabilise in the market, but things are still going up, and that's changing on a daily basis. But we do have good intelligence being given to us. So,
Okay, thank you.
Can I just, following on from that, is that something you'll be able to focus on in the Ebbsfleet Central Project Board and also the IIP? Well, Nick, and now, yeah.
But it's interesting that the number of construction starts has dropped significantly in the last quarter, particularly in London and the South East, where there's 70% drop off in construction starts. So there are people who are deferring work because of what Nick highlights here in terms of the rising commodity prices and so on. So it is something clear that we need to take a view on.
All right, thank you for that. Just if we could minute, I think Derek Murphy very correctly pointed out on the Eurostar situation, the It's a high priority issue for Kent County Council, and we're taking every opportunity to lobby central government and Eurostar to get train stopping in Kent as soon as possible, noting it is of high importance to the Kent economy. So absolutely. So, you know, any help we can be in that as well, Derek, just let us know.
Yeah, understood. Thank you, Chairman.
All right, brilliant. Okay, so that's Ian. Thank you for that. I think we'll duly note your report. Then, as I said, the next paper we're going to take, again, it's over to you, Ian, is our appointments to board committees and other roles. A number of us have been multi-hatting for a while whilst we've got our new NEDs in place. So I'm delighted to see this paper come forward. Ian, do you want to talk us through it?
Yeah, thank you, Simon. I mean, it's hopefully fairly self-explanatory, and I think you have probably spoken to all the board members in advance. So I don't think there are any surprises in here in terms of the roles that have been identified for members. We have subcommittees that are set out in here, and we have a number of sort of informal groups which they're not formal subcommittees. Things like IIP and Ebbsfleet Central where board members do participate. And then we have a number of roles in terms of championing particular disciplines such as HR or health and safety. So there's a schedule, and there are all the recommendations are set out as to who is appointed to what. So just ask the board to hopefully approve those appointments, and then the work of inducting people into those committees will begin quickly.
Excellent, thank you for that. Perhaps if I can just pick out a few highlights of our new NEDs. Fred Marudis, he will be chairing and was hired to chair our ARAC, and he will be going on to our planning committee. Simon is also going on to our ARAC. He is going on to our infrastructure and investment panel, and also our Ebbsfleet Central project board. Simon brings very significant professional experience in that, so will be a very important addition to that. Valerie Owen is going on to our planning committee as well, and she will be vice chair of that. And she is also going on as a appointee of the Development Corporation onto Ebbsfleet Garden City Trust, where I will be coming off that. So I think some great strength that we're bringing in to our various panels and committees from our new NED appointments. Can I ask if anyone's got any comments on that? So those, we have a series of recommendations, not just those, for all of the, everything contained within the schedule and the paper. Can I assume that that is agreed, everyone? Great, thank you very much indeed. That then brings us to our next paper. What does levelling up mean to EDC, or for EDC? Perhaps you can take this away, please.
Okay, so last month we looked at the implications of levelling up for planning, specifically in terms of the new legislation. However, Ian and I sort of, with the rest of the organisation, stepped back and considered how the wider levelling up agenda is appropriate for the organisation moving forward. Obviously, notwithstanding the current changes to politics generally, because levelling up is very central to the manifesto, we believe in whatever form it comes, it's still something we need to be very much aware of. So what we've tried to do is really look at, rather than just mentioning levelling up in everything we do, we've looked at where it's most appropriate for us to focus our energies in terms of levelling up, where we can have the greatest impact, where we can support our local authority partners in doing joint bids, etc. And in the paper, we set out our recommended approach moving forward, which is to focus on 7 of the 12 levelling up missions specifically, where we feel we can have greatest impact in terms of our investment planning and other roles. We've also identified some clear messaging across those 7 missions, which we'll use when we're talking to external partners and also developing bids and project briefs related to those. And these are very much built on the place narrative that Caroline shared with us last month, so that they very much complement each other. And then we're really sort of suggesting an approach where we embed that messaging and our approach and our commitment to levelling up through our project briefs and develop them through our projects, so that we can clearly see how we're contributing to this agenda moving forward. In terms of understanding the impact that we have longer term, we have examined our KPIs, our outcomes framework, the resident satisfaction survey, and the other tools that we currently use, and we feel that they're sufficient to give us a very good understanding of what we're doing in a short, medium and long term approach. So apart from perhaps increasing our understanding of our reach in community events and sort of small interventions like that, we're happy that our existing KPIs and outcomes frameworks will allow us to measure our impact and contribution to levelling up moving forward. So really just opening this up for discussion or any questions.
Kevin, thank you very much indeed. Board, can I ask if there are any questions or thoughts on this excellent paper? Go on, Neil. You go first then, Nick.
Can I just ask on the 4.2, you've got the 12 missions, and then you identify 7. Then the strategy at the end is quite largely on communication. What I wondered is, are we going to have a system where we check proposal paper against how does it perform against the levelling up missions? Would that be helpful? If it's not helpful because it's just a tick box exercise, then let's not do it. But it might be helpful in that it focuses minds on it. Views on that.
Yeah, we absolutely don't want it to be a tick box exercise, and we absolutely recognise that each project will cut across numerous missions. We have in Annex B, for example, identified some projects which are very clearly aligned to specific missions, and that would be their sort of driving highline. But if we look at more than those, the Annex C, which is the communications, is just really the communications we would use across all of the projects. So all of the projects would pick those clear narrative points for them. So maybe the one project picks 3 or 4 of the mission statements and embeds it within that project brief. What we didn't want to do, and what was starting to emerge, is that we just mentioned levelling up and everything, and that we're not very specific about how levelling up's embedded into each project. So we want each project to really think about all the levelling up missions, specifically the ones where we can have the greatest impact, and look at those narratives and think which ones are most appropriate for it, and then to embed that in the monitoring of each project as we move forward, rather than just having it as a general, what you say, tick box approach.
Well, question slightly more specific. When papers are presented, whether to the board or somewhere else, will there be a section where you say, how does this achieve the levelling up missions? And the question was, do you think that's a useful exercise or not?
So that's a really good point. We did have our away day last week with all staff, and half of that time was spent having this discussion, and staff got different comments. One of the actions from today, our next step, is to work with staff to see what is going to be most useful to them, and if a checklist is seen as something that they would like us to develop, then we will do that. So our next step is to work with staff to understand what is going to be most useful to them to embed these into our projects.
So we're going to look at it. I mean, I was thinking rather, for example, when the Human Rights Act came in, a lot of local authority reports had a little section on human rights, which to begin with were quite useful because it looked completely mechanistic. So what I'm really interested in is, can we do it in a way which isn't mechanistic, but then checks whether we're contributing to the.
Can I add a comment to that, Neil? I think it's a really good point. I think what I'm slightly concerned about is that many of our projects will the key rationale and driver for many of our interventions won't necessarily be one of the levelling up outcomes, but actually what many of those interventions will do is make a contribution to levelling up outcomes. So I think you're right. In our narrative around business cases, we always need to be clear what is the strategic contribution of that. That's the first part of the business case. What is this contributing to? And where we will now be is that we'll ensure that we capture the contribution to levelling up missions from that particular intervention. But it's likely to be one of a number of objectives, strategic contributions that particular investment will make. I'm also wary of not over claiming. So, and I've sort of been talking to the staff about this, that in business cases, it might be quite a modest investment. I don't know, £1 million or less. And I've seen this in many business cases in the past where you try and overclaim that you're going to change the world and change all the social inequalities in the area through a £1 million investment. We need to be realistic about the impact that sometimes relatively modest investments can make. But get the balance right, where it is making a contribution, that should be noted, and you should, if you are approving business cases, that should be very clear to you that it is making a contribution, but we shouldn't overclaim.
All right. I'd like to bring in Nick and then John.
So I enjoyed your paper. I thought it was really good. I'm interested to hear from you and maybe John. Joint Dartford, Gravesham and Ebbsfleet, where that is. Then going to Annex D, which is page 7. Quite hard to work out how Ebbsfleet is doing. How we are doing, where we need to improve, and where we're failing.
Okay. We've been working specifically with Gravesham on a number of bids, including the community renewal bid, and we've been looking at the sort of levelling up bid. It's very much Gravesham leading on these bids, and we're just helping on supporting where we can, or where there's locational basis, or we can sort of work together on skills. For example, we're working with both authorities. We've both got very similar ambitions and trying to improve on those. This month we've had a visit from Dartford's economics team and others to sort of discuss how we might do this moving forward. And again, we're going to have a visit from Gravesham's team in September as well. So we're really just, having got this work done now, we could start thinking what areas we might have commonality across, and sort of sharing what research we're doing, and then looking for the opportunities. As we say, there are significant opportunities for funding to come to these local areas, and it's probably better if we all work together and see where it can work. The ones we've identified so far are mostly around employment and skills that we've been looking at. In terms of the outcomes framework, this is something we probably brought to board about a year ago. It effectively is just factual data of what other sources have been compiled at. We've compared this area to the national average, and that's where the red, green and amber is. It's not anything that we've made a decision on. It's just factually whether the area locally is better or worse than the national average in terms of certain areas. However, it does help us identify some key areas that we can try and intervene and strengthen business cases. For example, on environment, where we've identified that there's a lack of kind of green space locally. So that gives us quite a strong case then for investment in parks and open spaces and things moving forward. So that's kind of how we're trying to identify some of the issues. Skills, GVA locally, particularly Gravesham was an issue. So again, trying to bring investment with the £6 billion fines we'll bring in into Ebbsfleet will really help us look at the GVA locally and try and help that inequalities. As Ian said, we're not claiming we're doing all of this. We're basically just saying we want to use the Ebbsfleet opportunity to try and influence and help our partners as much as possible. And this outcomes framework is one way that we'll measure the impact. The other way is the resident satisfaction survey, and people telling us how they feel about the local area, and equal balance both of those.
Just want to bring John in. The levelling up fund, does that have to be done by a local authority, or can the development corporation do that, or third party?
It is the local authority.
It has to be through the LA. Yeah.
I must say, I've read the paper. It was an interesting paper, specifically around paragraph 3.2. I didn't like what it said, but it was actually reflects truly the area and the issues both in Northleaf, but also regards Onscombe, which are areas of deprivation to within North Kent. I think I must admit, I was watching Jeremy when you mentioned the words joint bids, and his eyes lit up. So if only you'd been looking that way, you'd have had a reaction to and response to your commentary there. But I think the problem. Yeah, well, it wasn't that subtle. But I think for me, I'm struck. I'm very pleased with the journey the EDC's on. if I put it that way. In that, when I first came back on here, they seemed to be stuck in this, I'm in a red line area, and it's only about red line area. We don't talk about anything outside the red line. And it's like blinkers on, full steam ahead. I think this levelling up only works if you look outside the red line. Because if you're truly honest, there is no levelling up required in the red line area. Because it's either brownfield site or people have already made it. There is no levelling up in any category you want to define it. None. The levelling up the area needs is in Greenhouse and Swanscombe, past the Dartford and Grayson, specifically Northleet North. That's where the levelling up's needed. So if you want to engage in the argument for government funding and talk about levelling up and take some credit for levelling up, you also need to recognise how you're reaching out to those communities to make them part of that benefit coming and get them to recognise that they are part of it and you to recognise you need them as well. I think that's what's been missing. So on that basis, I support the paper. If the paper's going forward, recognise that. If you fail to recognise that, I will be pulling you up because there is no levelling up in the EDC.
Yeah, John, I think your point is very well made. Whenever we have discussions with the department, housing minister, secretary of state, obviously those positions change with some regularity at the moment. But you know, we're always stressing the importance to the communities that are here at the moment, as well as to make sure that they share the benefits of the investment. So, you know, I know from the board, from my perspective personally, that is a help. The success of Ebbsfleet flows to them as well. So,
okay, look, the problem I have with Levelling Up Agenda is that it's actually just labelling decency, and if you think about what the alternative to levelling up is, it's a willful discrimination, suppression of ambition, and all those kind of things that none of us have been trying to do for years. And so I think there probably are parts of the country where a failure of ambition or a failure of leadership, or even corruption with a small c of leadership, a failure of ambition and ideas, has grabbed the agenda, and therefore everything's run in a very terrible way and the community suffers. But I don't think actually in our neck of the woods that applies. I have enormous problems with the way John does some things, but the truth is he's had a complete mandate to do it. And the one thing I never question is his absolute dedication to his community, and that's the heart of levelling up, isn't it? Making those decisions. I kind of understand where he's coming from, but I think about Ebbsfleet not having any levelling up. But the truth is that the people who live here do, because they will be part of that wider community. And it comes back to reinforcing your point. There will be pockets of deprivation inside Ebbsfleet just because you bought yourself a very expensive house. In fact, that may well lead to more deprivation than you realise under the skin of it. So I just think it's about decency. I think the whole agenda, the problem I have with the agenda is it's been grabbed, I think, all over the country for different reasons to mean different things. And we're all bidding against each other for what should be a national priority of equalisation, fairness, non-discrimination, greater equalities. Because again, you know, I think we're failing to meet some of those objectives here, if I'm honest. I mean, these houses are very expensive. The social houses even place burdens on people. So I think there are issues about the way this community is developing. That for me is the levelling up. I don't like labels, but I do like life, and I do like making good decisions. And for those of us who are leaders, rather than trying to be leaders, those of us who try to be leaders and we don't have aspirations to say we're leaders, but just do it because we love the place. I think this has been the job of a lifetime. And I think this is someone in civil service come along and said, let's call it levelling up. I hope we've been doing that all the time. But if anything, this has created a degree of competitiveness, which is a bit unattractive. Parts of the communities in the country are saying, well, I need this. John will know when I say, you know, he gets benefits because he has more areas of deprivation who seem to be deeper in deprivation than ours, and therefore he gets some designation as able to bid. We don't get it, although some of our communities are as or more deprived than some of his. So it's a bizarre thing. What matters is the relationships. John and I work together really, really well. We work really well with Ebbsfleet. we all have our concerns about whether Ebbsfleet is truly a place or whether it is actually part of a community, and we've got to see what the governance arrangements are coming out of that in the end. But I'm up for levelling up because it's a way of unlocking decency, but I don't like labels generally. I haven't had much debate, but that's my view.
I think we're all in a violent agreement here with one another. So it's a good paper, Kevin. Thank you very much for that. I think are approved by all of us. It's a good update. Probably annually it would be good to have kind of a temperature read on the impact we're having locally. Get ways we can have that measurably. Something to consider for the forward plan for us. But is everyone happy with that paper? Great, thank you very much. Caroline, communications. Just got you to a sip of coffee there. Coming with me.
This is a whistle stop for this month. Work continues with promoting key events and projects across Ebbsfleet. We've got the upcoming Fusion Festival this weekend and is in circulation as we speak to residents, and we in due course. We've seen positive growth across social media and across our website. As I mentioned in last month will be used as a baseline for measurements moving where there might have been a bit of a gap beforehand. I just want to draw your attention, if possible, to item 1.4. Just as a note, we last week held our first website workshop where the team undertook a scoping exercise as to how we can revamp our website that meets the need of the audiences. It was a really productive session. We're now in the scoping phase of obtaining quotes from agencies and putting together a strong brief. And I just draw your attention to it because I know that you were very keen on being involved in the stakeholder mapping and pathway for improved website functionality. So in due course, we'll be inviting interested members of the board to give their opinions on website functionality and possible routes for improvement. So I'll be sure to keep you informed of progress. And then finally, section 5 of the paper in relation to wayfinding and signage. So having agreed and consulted with yourselves and the team on the improved narrative, which you kindly signed off during last month's board, we're now in a position to deliver on the wayfinding and signage business cases in line with Ebbsfleet's growth. In section 5, we note that the business cases have already been approved, and this is a really pivotal time for us to implement decent wayfinding and signage and implementing on that agreed narrative. Any question?
Board, any questions?
May I ask a question?
Of course, Daniel.
Is the signage just going to be stuff on poles?
What would you like it to be, Daniel?
Well,
That's part 2 question.
yeah, I've had something to do with this. I think there's a lot to be. I mean, the easy answer is to say that signage just means you stick stuff on poles. You put in poles and you stick, finger things on them, pointing in different directions, and stuff of that sort. I'm not talking about big road signs like you see on the A2, which are obviously on 2 very large poles and big flat panels, but the sort of stuff that cyclists, walkers, and people like that might use. And that's the obvious and easy way to do it. But there are more imaginative ways of doing signage as well, in ways of working it into the landscape, so that it's actually, in a sense, more organic and more distinctive. I haven't got a particular scheme to propose, obviously, out of the top of my head, for Ebbsfleet Garden City, because I've only just sort of turned my attention to this. But it may be that the business case is already based on the idea of buying a lot of poles and putting a lot of finger posts on them, and that's what we're approving going ahead with, in which case I'm not going to stop it at this stage or try and interrupt it at this stage. But if we're at an earlier stage, there are lots of sort of consultants and people who think about things like this. And it may just be that you could do something that was more imaginative and distinctive. And as I say, a bit more worked into the landscape and the built form. And then there are issues of maintenance, because posts, any post you put on the highway eventually gets knocked, falls over. It has to be looked after. Signs get damaged and so on. So sometimes the working things into the built environment and into the landscape actually reduces maintenance costs over time as well, makes it easier for people. Anyway, I may be coming too late to all of this, but quite a lot of thought has gone into this, not in my head, but in other heads, better qualified heads, about how you do this. And keeping clutter down generally is a good principle. Apart from the maintenance issues, it's a good principle, because it uses up footway and it creates hazards for people with limited sight. You have to think about the color of the poles and the light contrasts and things like that. Anyway, this is probably a very unhelpful contribution at this stage.
Well, I don't think it is, Daniel. I think that's very helpful. Thank you. Julia might be able to comment on, but I suspect we're quite an early stage in terms of the wayfinding and signage design and approach. So, but I'm sure that
you can achieve other things by a consistent use of lettering. You know, if what you want is something that is distinctive to the garden city, then a distinctive use of lettering and a distinctive use of colours can be quite important. Just to take a small example, in Birmingham, the street signs are black paint on white backgrounds, but the moment you cross into the plush borough of Solihull, they're all white on green, and you know immediately that you're in Solihull just by the fact you've got all these white and green street signs around.
Right. Yeah.
And so simple things can colour and lettering can make something distinctive as well and create a sense of cohesion.
So,
you know, this is Ebbsfleet Garden City.
All of us with local government experience will, you know, have the scars of all this. I mean,
that's just street signs. I'm not talking. You're not talking about street signs. You're talking about signage. But it's and wayfinding. But it's the principle behind it. You know, you can do something at no great extra cost, which is a little bit more distinctive, a bit more imaginative, and gives a coherency and avoids just the get a pole and stick a finger post on it. You know.
Absolutely, Daniel. I'm going to bring Julia in, then Caroline. Yeah.
Yeah. So the two parts to it, in terms of the signage, which is about identifying where Ebbsfleet is, that is highway signage, but we've got flexibility on what goes onto that sign in terms of the design, which hasn't been done yet. In terms of the wayfinding, it absolutely follows the principles that you've been talking about, which is about design and about using distinctive features, and it was done to complement the area, so it took into account that. The other thing we did bear in mind is that the red line boundary of the Garden City is not one big area, it's in different sections. So for example, on Northfleet Embankment East, we will be within an area, and then Gravesham Borough around the outside. So we have worked with both boroughs to make sure whatever we do complements what they've got, so that we're not doing something which is totally out of character. Because as I say, our red line boundary is not one big area, it's groups of areas in there. So we've got to do something that complements. And maintenance costs were included in our business case as well. So we are at that early stage of getting ready to go out and procure someone to do that final design for us.
The other thing is just to say that, and again, people with local government experience will know this, it's very, you need to think what you're wayfinding to. A small example, outside Kensington High Street station, the local authority, even when I was in charge, wanted to put up signs that would tell you, for example, how to get to the town hall. And I just said to them, but, you know, anyone arriving at 90% of the people arriving at Kensington High Street station who don't know where they are, visitors, are almost certain to want to know where Marks and Spencer's is rather than where the town hall is. So why are you putting up signs to the town hall? What is it people want to be way-found to? And it's very easy for people like a development corporation to think, well, they want to go to these are the important things because they're the important things for us. But they're not always the important things for visitors.
No, absolutely, Daniel. I think that includes, walkways, cycleways, nature trails, the way to go to our significant community infrastructure assets, which we're investing in. So the point is very well made. I'm going to bring in Caroline, and then I think we'll move on from this one.
Yeah, just to summarise, Daniel, on your points, the reason that it was sitting on the communications paper, although we'll work across teams, is that we're at a point where we can amalgamate our stronger understanding from the revision and the amends to the narrative, and as you say, start implementing that across Ebbsfleet and start to think about those more strategic and innovative designs, the way that we can incorporate colour palettes, work collaboratively with the neighbouring communities so that it fits well and cohesively across the entire area. But it's just a note that we acknowledge your comments and that we will be using the narrative and the refined brand identity that we've worked for quite some time on to make sure that there is that cohesive strategy in the way that we implement wayfinding and signage.
Great, Caroline. I'm assuming we'll bring something back to board for us to have a look at what we're proposing to do before we do it. Nick, I'm going to bring you in. I think Jeremy, you want to
very quickly. Could I go? Oh, sorry, you want it first?
No, you go first.
Okay. Look, I think one thing I'd just suggest is that the wayfinding profession has become a really big industry now, and they all come up with the same suggestions, and they all come up with the same solutions really, and to such extent that I think Dartford was sold a whole set of wayfinding equipment for its town, which was promised to be completely unique, and then I got the train at Gravesend and walked into exactly the same thing. So it is there's a kind of an orthodoxy inside wayfinding, which I think. So my only plea, very quickly, you know what I mean when I say this, can we, when considering people to help us with this, look at genuinely creative people rather than just wayfinding consultants and organisations? Because I think the orthodoxy inside it leads to exactly that town hall mentality, pointing to. I mean, there's a sign outside. I think it might even be Gravesham that says railway station. It is literally across the road from the railway station. Now, I understand that probably in the algorithm of site wayfinding that probably makes sense, but it's actually ludicrous, really, and it's kind of, and we all do it. We've all done it, and there's crazy signs say post office right next to a post office. Crazy. So I think we need creative people who come up with really good things. Wayne Hemingway did a piece of work at the States in Great Gateshead, where his street naming was actually going to be based upon days of the week and day. So you could live at a house called Thursday, March the 3rd, and he never got away with it. It was too crazy. But the house next door was Friday, March the 4th, and then behind you it was April and May, and you knew exactly where you were. It was bonkers, but it kind of worked. It was just creativity into the argument. So not just wayfinding consultants, please. Let's talk to genuine people.
Just before I bring Nick in, when I look around where I was the leader and you see these signs, wayfinding signs, which are being burst into by delivery lorries, Daniel's point, vandalised, smashed up, they don't get replaced, it just makes it even worse than it was without the sign. So it needs to be resilient. So,
I'm loath to interrupt you, but Wayne Hemingway had an answer for that. He installed the bollards pre-broken. So if you go to the bridge, the bollards are actually already installed at funny angles. Okay. So when the DHL come along and knock one over, it makes a difference.
I think that is brilliant. Absolutely.
Right. Nick, Simon, do you want to come in on?
So there is a great opportunity here to not so much signposts, it's actually you are here, the centric circles consistently show you where all the facilities are, all the routes to the adjoining. So many people have actually done this really well. Right, we want there when go there, wayfinding is perfect. Constantly telling you Wembley, Barking Riverside. These are the really good examples to get.
London Docklands Development Corporation. I'm going to segue into Simon there, but you're spot on there, Nick. Simon.
All I would ask is reconsider the digital dimension.
Yeah.
Because I found my way here today, not through any signage, but through digital maps. The importance of having the digital maps accurate so that people can use digital wayfinding is critically important. So I think I would just plead that we don't just default to a physical sign.
Spot on. Great. And if we can deliver all of that for 340,000, that's great. But if we need a bit more money, you need to come back with, let's get it right. Let's not shoehorn it into that budget. Okay, great. So we've got some recommendations in front of us. We've got the board engaged on this issue, so good luck. And look forward to it coming back to us. Thank you very much for that. Mark, planning, design and delivery report.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. As usual, update paper from me. So in 2.2, yeah, planning committee are going to be meeting later. We've got our first presentation from Western Homes. So Western Homes will be a new developer in Ebbsfleet. They've done some schemes around Dartford Town Centre. And here they've been working with Henry Camlands for the market centre in Alcadon. So phase 2 and 3, so some residential components, but also collection of sort of uses going in there. So yeah, really good scheme coming forward. So to see what the committee think of that one. So 2.3, yeah, just the usual table. So a couple of items identified for September, so we'll be focusing on those. Section 3 obviously just refers back to Annex A. I just put in just a little bit of information there about the George and Dragon Public House, purely because there's been quite a lot of public interest. We've had quite a lot of objection received from residents, particularly Swanscombe.
We're determining it because we're the LPA. Who's the applicant there?
I don't know off the top of my head.
It's nothing to do with us, is it?
No.
Yeah. No, let's just be clear.
No, it's a former pub that's closed down. There was a previous application that went to appeal and was dismissed, and this is a resubmitted scheme. Just a couple of other things, just in terms of the development sites. We recently approved the Heritage Interpretation Board's job for Cable Wharf, so hopefully they will be going in shortly. We also served a breach of condition notice on Bellway on Friday in relation to dust issues at Harper Village, so we're in discussions with them to get that resolved. Design forum update section 4. So thanks to Neil for being involved in the selection of the forum members. We're going to be doing an announcement in terms of the selected group very shortly, and then there'll be an induction day in September. Section 5, a few sort of miscellaneous items, as it were, some various smaller updates. Just to draw people's attention, I suppose, to 5.5 and Annex C, which is the infrastructure funding statement. This is the third one that I've brought to the board now. We have to publish these by December of every year. This one's been brought forward much earlier than usual because I'm quite keen to try to publish them closer to the end of the financial year. It does show that we are holding a reasonable amount of money in table 3. So we'll be focusing in to work with partners to understand how that can be spent. There's also a bit of focus that we're going to give this year just to understand where infrastructure funds is being collected by other organisations, particularly KCC, and the way in which we can then be explaining the way in which that funding is then going to be used in the local area. So we'll be focusing on that a little bit. Section 6, yeah, the usual update in terms of housing numbers. There is a slight error on the dashboard. Apologies for that. The graph in the top left-hand corner doesn't match the number. So the completions number so far for the year is 119. I did reach out to senior people, Taylor Wimpey and Countryside before the meeting. I'm afraid I haven't got any further numbers to report back on, but we'll hopefully have a complete picture for you for the next board meeting. And due to the holiday periods, we decided to cancel the developers meeting this month, but we are having various different bits of general engagement. I've got sessions with Bellway and Countryside like that very shortly. So as usual, happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Yes, Neil.
Can I come back to one that I asked before? And I think it's on the action log, you were going to do an update on the 5,000.
Yes.
And just to remind everybody, aiming for 5,000 completions by 2025. We got 3,000 because we had the opening of Simon opened the house, which was the 3,000 completion. We've got 630 in the plan for this year.
Yeah.
Are we going to meet the 5,000?
Great question. Yes. So I've gone through the numbers with Claire in my team who engaged with the developers. It looked as though that was generally coming out about 5,400. So at the moment, we're confident that we'll meet the 5,000. There is a bit of a buffer. It's not a massive buffer, but obviously we will continue to monitor that. At the moment, for the sake of giving you guys some assurance, we have done the check and I'll have a look at it.
Means we're looking to some quite high completion figures for the following 2 years, higher than we've achieved to date, I think.
Yeah, I mean the number of homes currently under construction is probably the highest or the second highest number that we've also had. There was also over 700 units that are currently out there partway through. So that does give some confidence. We will obviously continue to monitor it.
Good.
Okay. Good. Yes, Simon.
I'd like a briefing at some stage around the carbon model. Further detail around that at some stage.
Well, that was going to be my comment because we've been having this. But currently, we have no. Really key here.
That should bring
Could you give us 30 seconds on your paragraph 5.1?
So we had a really helpful briefing from the consultants last week, and the idea to be taking that to our internal place board for the next session. I think it's on the forward plan to have a longer conversation reporting back with this group in October. So that would explain the work that's been done in relation to the carbon model. That work looks at various different recommendations that could be deployed depending upon where you want to get to by when. Obviously, those have different cost implications and what is the target that we're trying to get to? What is our ability to meet that target based upon our rate? So we have done that up for obviously. In terms of the biodiversity net gain work, again, really helpful piece of work the Kent Wildlife Trust did for us. We've had a recent meeting, interestingly, with the Environment Agency and Natural England around doing piece of work to look at some sort of strategic approach to sort of environmental things. So we need to pick that up with them and then work out how we then take that strategic piece of work forward. But yeah, happy to cover that a little bit more on the induction.
Yes, Neil.
I think we also need to think how we enforce it, how we get people to actually do it. And Nate mentioned the urban green factor, which in the plan, London policies, you have to meet it and you have to do a calculation. Would it help you if and I don't know, Dartford are promoting a plan at the moment, they got a policy on that would help us, or should we prepare our own local, can't prepare a policy, but some design guidance on that?
So the urban greening factor is a bit more of a London thing, I think.
Yes.
Rather than
but a BNG.
Yeah, the emerging plan for Dartford does have some information on it. There is also work going on across Kent, to understand the correct percentage. We also received all local authorities, planning authorities received funding from DEFRA at the end of last year to be supporting work around biodiversity net gain. And we've been talking to KCC to take a strategic approach and to get some resourcing across the county to be able to move that agenda forward. But that would also assist with monitoring.
So one of the spots, you need a bit of paper to say to the developer, you've got to do it.
Yeah.
But also, but I guess the other point, and I think you made this, you've had this point before, is that Kent's policy, we are a garden city, we have to be +1.
Yeah, and that's, or do we not think that?
I know you've got
Well,
financial stresses on Ebbsfleet Central.
So, well, 10% is a standard metric that's being used as a minimum. We need to see and understand how that actually flows through, what the baseline data shows, and how we're then demonstrating the net gain investment into the structure in place.
Yeah, so all of the work that was undertaken by Cameron was really helpful. I'm sure that the document plan does talk about 10%. I just can't categorically remember that particular part in the plan, but obviously that's what the environment has. So I'm sure that the policy position over time would support that. The work, obviously, if he's then opted to then do additional BNG over and above what the position is, and that would then be a decision, possibly on a project by project basis.
So how are we going to monitor this then?
There would then be monitoring involved through the planning permissions when they are. If there is a requirement on a planning permission to hit a particular level, then that would then be either a planning condition or section 06, something like that. There is then a resource pressure for us as to how then that will be looked at. Whether that's then monitoring reports that we can require for applicants, whether that's then us then having more eyes on the ground. There's a lot of work that needs to be done to get the Environment Act to be enacted by next year, and the whole thing about monitoring enforcement, I think, is not a settled area as it were.
How does the board get visibility to? In your report?
So the work that we did for the biodiversity net gain actually came from the Environment Action Plan. It was one of the items that was identified in that. So yeah, I'm happy to obviously provide some more updates, some more regular updates on that moving forward. We are hopefully going to be getting some more internal resource around sort of sustainable environmental agenda to be able to deliver on the actions within the action plan, and that will be how we can then.
Okay, good. John, you want to come in?
Yes, please. We were talking earlier about working with the two boroughs in language of levelling up and make sure we're integrating things, etc. Language is important for me, particularly if I live in the area, and I know, very respectfully, board members, you all put a lot of effort in, none of you do live in the area. So when I get a report in front of me in Appendix C that refers to work being done in North East, that was a ward I represented that they got rid of in 1997. Not been one since 1997. There's nothing north, nothing south. Even the new boundaries coming in, there's no north and east. So I appreciate as board members, you may not know what I'm talking about, it probably doesn't bother you. But as a local representing the area, particularly I do represent this area, I guess what you're talking about. The residents, if they bother to read and watch this or come and see it, as officers, you should at least get the names of the areas you're using correctly.
Yes, yeah, apologies. So North Fleet East, and I have noticed that there is a typo there as well, so apologies. So North Fleet East comes from the way in which the strategic site is described in the Gratian local plan. It isn't going back to a ward boundary. We always think, well, actually, should we refer to that as Cable Wharf rather than North Fleet Embankment East? Then Cable Wharf is the marketing name for Keepo, so it's a bit difficult to work out. Do I call it Cable Wharf because that's the marketing name? Do I call it North Fleet Embankment East or North Fleet East because that's what the strategic policy?
Now is North Fleet South. North East was that here.
In terms of the ward, it is, yeah, but I think that the way in which the local plan and the development sites are described, well, yeah, I mean, in terms of the community, John, how do you think that would be better described in the future? Hey, should I go with Cable Wharf?
Go with Cable Wharf, yeah. Because people understand that, they can relate to that. Why should say what is the area? Actually talk about the area of what we're talking about. Don't just say North and East, because it's.
Yeah, absolutely. People don't really relate to wards, particularly as the names are changing. You go to another boundary,
do another one.
Yeah, so you're going to get new lane, new ward name, and wards layouts. So, well, yeah,
better than it is.
So you can say that, Jeremy, but I was down in Ashmere and they've got road signs which say Borough of Ebbsfleet. Which anyway, it's a bit of a
takeover.
takeover.
Get out of Dartford, not to get into Dartford.
Just settle on Ebbsfleet. All right, great. Good report. I think we are noting that. There's no recommendations. That's for information, duly noted. Thank you for that. Ebbsfleet Living. Kevin.
I'll take the paper as read, just to pick out a couple of highlights of the month. Quite a lot of really exciting summer stuff kicking off already. So we've had a summer fair in Springhead, which is the first that we've had in Springhead, and that's being held by both residents, the school, and local arts organisations, Cohesion Plus and Blueprint. So really good turnout at that. Last weekend, or sorry, 2 weekends ago, we had a summer fair in Cherry Orchard School, again led by the PTA. Really great turnout there. Real enthusiasm from residents, and again thanks to the local emergency services who came as well and let people explore their crafts and bands and sort of learn about that profession, which was really interesting as well. This Must Be the Place programme has had a poetry sessions across all the local schools, and it developed a whole kind of range of poetry propositions by pupils, which are going to be displayed in different areas around the Garden City over the next year, including at Ebbsfleet International Station and other places. So again, a sort of pool of poetry that has been developed locally, and we're going to use on hoardings and different things as well in the Garden City, which will be exciting. A new culture forum, which is a group of local residents and artists, has formed to try and develop a kind of programme of activity themselves that they want to see coming forward in the Garden City moving forward, or the local area moving forward. Again, a big challenge with any of this is a lack of community infrastructure, very few places to go, really difficult to book places to deliver events and activities, so that's our challenge. However, obviously we're working on that as an organisation. And then looking forward, obviously the highlight of the year is the opening of the Platinum Jubilee Park, which the Honourable Jeremy Kite will be opening on the 30th of July. I have put my hand out and designed a sign for Jeremy to unveil, so hopefully it won't be seen as offensive, but I know people were quite offended by the sign last month, so I have taken the sign, the temporary sign, they've not been working. We had a discussion about the temporary sign, so Jeremy will be unveiling a sign at the bridge, which is Corten steel and aluminium, so quite bespoke, so hopefully it's not offensive.
Hopefully it's not offensive. That's a great start.
But anyway, I think what we're trying to do is trying to do something that was bespoke for its location, because the bridge there is Corten steel. The reason for that. So that wouldn't be part of the wayfinding strategy, because that's a very specific thing just to mark the opening of the bridge. But I hope that will be a great event. We're working again with Cohesion Plus and other organisations locally to create a really great event on that, and hopefully it'll be a highlight of the summer. And it really is the first of 7 city parks that will start a grid of green space, which will be 44% of the whole Garden City in the future. So seeing this park open is amazing. I was around it last weekend, peering through the railings because you can't get in yet, and it's quite fantastic. So it'll be really great to see that.
Great. Caroline, we'll make sure we get plenty of coverage of all this.
Yeah, I'll be there.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm
Good.
sorry, just to say, my colleague Laura and Harry have been sort of helping develop that event, so Laura will be coming on next. So.
Right. Good. All right. To make progress, I see that we're noting that. That's great. Thank you for all the work as always. Sure, there'll be plenty of discussion around public art in Ebbsfleet Garden City. Laura. You ready, Daniel? I'm expecting you to be coming in on this one.
So I think you had a brief discussion on public art. Yeah, and outlines the current process and sets out some recommendations approach for the whole of the Garden City, with particular reference to opportunity owned land and developments. So I guess if you focus on section 8, which is the recommendations, and they include along with a funding approach and a management and maintenance with the Garden City. So really, I just welcome any questions.
Great. Board, any comments on this?
Can I just ask a couple of things? The first is where developers are making contributions to public art. Is it generally our practice to allow them to commission the public art, or do we take it over?
Developers commission the.
I'm sorry. I wasn't going to say this until the end of the public meeting, but I'm having during the whole of this meeting, I've had quite a lot of breakup, which is why I've kept my camera off most of the time. So I'm not hearing absolutely everything that people are saying. So could I just ask if you could just repeat that answer?
No problem. I'll try and speak up as well. So
thank you.
State where public art is coming through section 106 contributions, the developer is directly commissioning that public art, but usually through a public art consultant or sometimes their landscape architects that take the role.
Well, if we have confidence in an Ebbsfleet Garden City approach, wouldn't it be sensible for us to persuade them to give that job to us? I mean, of course, we can't force them to. They can discharge their Section 106 agreement in the manner that they choose. But many of them are, frankly, perfectly happy to say, that's marvellous, we'll give you the money and we'll pay for it. There's a budget, obviously, you've got to stick within the budget. But if you want to take over delivering it, that would be one less job for us. Has no financial effect on us.
Like, I think that's a very reasonable idea. The situation is that actually most of the public art that developers need to deliver has already been delivered.
No, I was coming to that separately. I mean, it's clear that what is in scope of this paper is a limited part of the public art palette, if you see what I mean, because so much has been delivered. Are you saying there's no more to be delivered?
There is some more to be delivered, which is currently already identified within a Section 106 agreement. So the paper is really trying to focus on the opportunity that EDC has through its own development to create a new approach to commissioning public art, which we could then have control over. Yes,
just come back to my question then. Of the remaining Section 106 art to be delivered, is there any which is at a stage of development where we could offer to take it over?
Not really. So Henley Camland have a few pieces left to deliver for Alcaden primarily, and they have just taken on a new public art consultancy. So it might be slightly tricky at this point in this game to go and say to them, we'd like to take this over. And I think, to be honest, the public art consultancy that they brought on board is a lot better. And I think that will result in much better and more exciting public art for Alcaden. So my recommendation was that we accept that, and then we look forward, you know, from there on and look at what we can do within our own developments or other developments that haven't been identified yet.
Okay, well, I just say then that when you say better, do you mean better than us or better than the people they had before?
Well, previously they had, it was a company, actually more of a landscape company, Groundwork, who are a very good company, but they're not public art specialists.
No, they're not. So better than before is what you're saying, not better than us.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I just think that if we are to have future planning applications that are conceivable, that are going to come forward that have a Section 106 public art element attached to them. I know nearly all of them are granted, they're all granted at one sense, but you never know what might happen in the future. I think we should think about actually offering to take that on and deliver it ourselves. That was my first point. My second point was to do with the principles of the approach to public art. And this can sound a little bit harsh, but there's always a temptation to say you want to have local artists, but local artists aren't necessarily the best. And I think we should have a principle more skewed towards excellence in public art, which is likely to be durable. I don't mean physically durable, because that's neither here nor there. I mean, you could have a bad sculpture that is absolutely physically indestructible. I completely accept that. But durable in the sense that people will notice it and enjoy it for a long time to come. So I would just say some sense of excellence should be present, if you like. And that doesn't necessarily mean, you know, great famous sculptors who try to charge £1 million or £2 million for each of their pieces, because that would be unaffordable as well. But some attempt to ensure that we're getting in at the best edge of where contemporary art is developing, because in terms of sculpture and public art, Britain does have some of the best in the world, and it'd be a pity if we didn't take advantage of that.
I couldn't agree more, and I think I've outlined in the paper that I think that we should be trying to attract both, you know, high quality local artists, but also, you know, national and international artists, and that there's really room for everybody, and certainly, you know, excellence in terms of ambition. You know, it's a very difficult one to call in terms of quality of art, because it's quite subjective, but I do agree. I think that we can attract a broader range of artists work here at Ebbsfleet.
I just think that I would de-emphasize the local.
Okay.
I would seriously de-emphasize the local as a criterion.
Well, I'm not sure, you know, I agree, or our colleagues here would agree with that. You know, but I think definitely a broader range of artists we can.
Well, I'm asking, I mean, maybe if we want to ask colleagues here, you know, maybe they know excellent local sculptors.
From my point of view, I think there is a balance between major public art, from which you might want to hold some elements of competition, which is more regional nature in terms of embedding the local community in your public art. There's a lot of public art that gets stolen as well. You have to bear.
Nick, could you speak up, because you're.
Harlow has lost all of its public art, but in that context, actually embedding Gravesham or Dartford Arts Councils in our process, I think, would be a really strong message. Also contemplating that public art's not just sculpture, it's actually also roundabouts, bridges, rolling art presentations, a sort of fourth plinth arrangement. So you may have a temporary exhibition on a bridge, you know, it's hired in, but actually embedding the community so that the local artists and the Gravesham or Dartford Arts Councils have an involvement. Then you expand the process so that actually they're involved in hoardings. Hoardings can then be utilised for local, you know, expressing local art competition winners and similar. And then you have digital, because digital art will become increasingly important. That then blends into wayfinding, but also advertising what's on. So I really would like us to think about a rolling art strategy. And then we need to think about the body that we would use for our own land, which should be the trust, and we need to put some governance around that process. But I would definitely say, Daniel, that yes, there is a place for nationally important artists, but we have to fundamentally give ownership to the local community as well as the process. But
yeah, but you could have total.
Really allows you to do that, because then you have annual arrangements, you have guest artists, etc. etc.
Can I take some of the pressure off Daniel by saying what I think he was going to say, which is that in Dartford there's more to the art than the commission, and it seems to me that by involving the local arts groups in the commission, it doesn't mean they necessarily have to commission the work from a local artist.
Exactly.
I just come back from Rome, and I probably wouldn't have gone to the Sistine Chapel if it had been painted by Peter Thopodopoulos, because he happened to live 200 yards from the Sistine Chapel. What you need to do is you need to commission the best and appropriate artwork for the most appropriate place, don't you? But I do think our arts, the Dartford is a really thriving arts network, and I think they would absolutely love to be involved in developing the strategy and commissioning the arts, but not necessarily from themselves. I think that's the point.
Exactly. That's exactly the point I make.
You want people of artistic temperament and quality locally to say this is your space, and the corporate. I mean, I know we're not talking about the corporate ones now, but the corporate artistic providers and consultants. If I see another aluminium man pushing a ball uphill at some business park, I'm going to do some damage, because it's it's very corporate out of the catalogue, and they're all over the place, aren't they? And what you've got to do, we've got to get back to genuine, creative, disruptive art that people really like locally and will defend to the hilt. And I think that's what we've got to get to. That's the golden aim. I think just give it, I know this isn't suggested we just have local artists to say, whatever quality you are, you can do this when you live here. I know we're not saying that, but I think there's a role for the local artists to commission great art from anywhere in the world.
Yeah,
I think
the area and making sure that feeds through.
I know, that's what I think.
That's what the commissioning group is meant to be.
Oh, you're right. It's in there.
Right.
It's in there.
Laura, we're going to make progress. Have you got enough back from us?
Well, I suppose what I'm looking for is, some comments and I guess decisions on the recommendations of a strategy, and the way, forward for Ebbsfleet that I've outlined, and whether.
I think you have general agreement. Yeah, absolutely.
What we're asking for is in there. It's in
there.
Thank you very much.
That's great. All right, so I think we're all supportive of that. Thank you very much for the work on this.
Very good.
The extent to which we can fold new planning applications into our narrative and our process, that would be good. Almost 6. So that's that investment plan update. Julia.
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of our expenditure at the moment, we're only working on the commitments and receipts budget that we've got allocated to us, and we've set out the we're fairly light spend at the moment, which is just under £1 million on capital and similarly on revenue. Post this board, we will review those budgets because we will need to look at funding. We have made some progress with the department on our full SR budget, but we're not in a position that we have that confirmed currently. I would just draw board's attention to the fact we're now 5 months into the financial year. It's very hard to turn around capital programmes when we've got that level of delay. So we will absolutely do what we can do as soon as we get those budgets confirmed, but it is incredibly difficult to turn that around. That said, we have continued to make progress on each of the projects that we are working on, and we'll continue to do that. We will be entering what's known as SUPs in November, but we will start working on that across the summer, which enables us to do that budget review. In terms of programme level risks, obviously the first one I've just spoken about, and earlier on we were talking about the pressures in the construction industry at the moment and what we're doing about that. The third party approvals continues to be quite a significant pressure on any of our projects with some of the statutory agencies. And we've reviewed the risk approach that we take to those, because I think we don't feel confident enough once we think that we've mitigated it to remove anything to do with those statutory agencies from a risk budget from there. In terms of health and safety, there's been limited construction activity on site at the moment, where we are the client under CDM, and therefore there are no incidents reported. I actually wrote this paper before last week, obviously. So the incidents you've got reported in terms of our site assets are the ones that occurred before we had the heat. What I would report to the board is that we in particular did not have any specific assets damaged by fire last week, but the section where the landfill site is adjacent to Ebbsfleet Central, there was a fire there, which from the photos we've seen, about half the site went. Those of us who were in the building on Tuesday afternoon, there was significant levels of fires surrounding us in the horizon that we were witnessing as well. So there was, I think we counted 6 at one point, but we were lucky. In terms of mitigation, we have where we've got mower operations. We've stopped that because that can be a cause of starting fires, etc. So we've taken some mitigating actions on the assets we own as well from there. So that's a summary of my report. In Annex 2, there is detail on each individual project. Just to note, just to pick a couple, I know we're going to talk about some later on. I won't talk about those now, but in terms of the A2, which is the Bean and Ebbsfleet Junction, Highways England continue to have night closures where they're optimising the traffic signals, and they will do the landscaping when we get into the autumn time, into that planting season. From there, in terms of our electricity supply, the planning application for the primary substation in Norfolk Embankment West has been submitted, and UKPN are also re-tendering the groundworks for the cabling from the grid sites out towards the primary sub, because the first quotation they got was exceptionally high, so they're looking for a better value solution on that. I know we talked about the wastewater treatment works at last board. We had a very good meeting with the team at Southern Water after last board meeting, where the programme and the ground investigations going on have been significantly progressed by Southern Water. So that was good to see there. So that's just a highlight on a few of those projects. Quite happy to take any specific questions on anything now.
Board, any observations, comments, questions? Right, thank you very much, Julia. That's for noting. You're back on digital infrastructure study.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So in September last year, we were asked to look at a digital infrastructure strategy or study. So we did commission this, and the key tenets of it were really around broadband connectivity, then digital connectivity in terms of mobile, and then digital inclusion. The key outcomes of that is that, one, the industry absolutely wants to work with us. In terms of fibre broadband, again, a lot of work was done to investigate that. We have included some mapping within the report. There are some legacy agreements which operate within the Whitecliffe development, but they don't affect anything beyond the Whitecliffe development. In terms of connectivity and the work that both Ian and I had done prior to this study with BT Openreach to secure Ebbsfleet as one of the priority sites with them was in place anyway. So in terms of the connectivity around fibre broadband, we felt that that was in a good position, both within the red line boundary and outside of it. I'm sure there are specific issues, but the mapping at the moment does show that that is in a good place. And obviously we are going to have the 2025 copper kind of cut off and switch off. The area where we feel that we should probably look more and work more with the industry is around mobile connectivity and digital there. What's very clear is that that industry tends to be slightly behind the curve in terms of regeneration projects which are going on, because there'll be connectivity now, Excuse me. And then as more people move in, the demands increase, and therefore the kind of service resilience then goes down. I think what's clear for us is we need to look at that across the whole area, because if you put, say for example, we were to put digital connectivity in work with Whitecliffe and put it in there, it would create a shadow over the area immediately below the certain mast, and that area would get connectivity from somewhere else. So we need to map the whole area, in particularly looking at our development plans that are coming forward for Ebbsfleet Central and obviously Blue Lake in the future, to make sure that we don't create any shadows where we do. That is specialist mapping. I have to be honest, it's beyond my capability and knowledge to do that. There are specialist companies to do that. So, and we think that industry will automatically do it for us if we go to them and work strategically with them. And we have had that engagement to confirm that they would do that with us. The other part of the investigation was really around digital inclusion. And what was clear to us was that Kent County Council have been doing a significant amount of work in that area. There is an officer assigned to this area to work on digital inclusion. And one of the actions for us was really just make sure that we're with the two boroughs, that we're all totally joined up in the work that we're doing. And also there is a link to that to social value for us as well. So in the recommendations, we've set out the high level recommendations for us to do in terms of the actions. So a lot of it is working with Dartford and Gravesham, but also I think we can make sure that if we do the mobile mapping, that covers the wider area, and we work with our colleagues in both of the boroughs to make sure that no one creates a shadow over everyone else. So happy to take some questions.
Do we have a utilities project manager?
I have half of a part person at the moment who's on a short-term contract, and it's something we need to address. Currently, I'm covering half of the work, and the other person's helping me to do that. So,
Ian, have we looked at the requirement for that role and full role, and
yeah, we've got a post in the structure, and in fact Julia and I were exchanging draft job descriptions earlier this week, so we plan to go out for that role in September after the summer holidays.
All right, so part of the job specification would be this specific area.
Yep.
I assume that where we need increased mobile coverage, that the potential that could be integral to the structures that we ourselves would be developing on our own land.
Yeah, it absolutely has to be, so we don't create that shadow. So everyone has almost a uniform connectivity across. I think we do have to also be sensitive to the community in terms of where they are placed, because I think that's obviously can be a very emotive subject as well. So.
All right, good. Any comments on this?
There can be, when you place digital masts, significant levels of objections to them.
When you don't have.
Yeah.
But there could be part of the structural.
That's, yeah, we need to think about this creatively.
Yeah.
So.
All right, okay, good. Got that report. Thank you very much for that, Julia. Gerard, Finance and Operations report.
Chair, the report in front of you is at the position as at the end of June, so 3 months, the first quarter of this financial year. The details are at Annex A. We've sort of got off to a slow start on revenue, but we are forecasting that we will spend all of our allocation and the receipts that we expect to generate this year. As I say, details are at Annex A. The report also outlines section 4, the sort of recruitment that's being going on at the moment. Some of that's been concluded, as we've already mentioned. Also attached, though, and I'm seeking approval for, is the new hybrid working policy. This has evolved out of the working arrangements for dealing with COVID. We've ummed and ahed about when would be the right time to create our own document. Now it felt to be that time. Other organisations have also gone into print.
and have documented what their policies are. As it says at the end of the document, this isn't the final version. We need to keep it under review. We are still learning. It has evolved out of dealing with COVID, but it sets out the expectations that staff have to, how they manage their time. So there's advantages to this new flexible working arrangement, as is hopefully laid out in the report. As I say, it's not a contractual change for staff. Staff remain as office-based, but it is setting out the guidelines that they will need to work in this sort of new flexible working from home, working in the office approach. So we're seeking board approval on that.
Thank you, Gerard. Any comments, observations? Two people are happy with hybrid working policy?
I thought it was very good. Just on terminology though, Gerard, we need to be careful we're not conflating flexible and hybrid.
Yes.
So this is a hybrid working policy, not a flexible working policy.
No, as it does state, there will be a new flexible, and it's also a flexi time policy as well. So there's three. Yes, but
so
hybrid.
You will be bringing forward the flexible working policy.
Yes. So the hybrid is just the flexible way of working between office and home, not the flexible way hours of. Yeah.
Right.
May I come in?
Daniel, of course. Yeah.
I'm against it. I mean, I'm working from home today because of advice related to not attempting to travel when most of the trains aren't operating, which frankly I could have worked out without advice, really. But anyway, it is the official advice. And there may be reasons why people can't come into the office. And they may be general, like a train strike. There may be individual reasons why people can't come into the office to do with health episodes and things like that, or sudden emergencies and disasters at home. And I understand all of that. But I'm generally not in favour of adopting a hybrid model for working as a standard in what might be called normal circumstances. But I suspect I shall be in a minority of one, in which case I'm sure this will go through. And if we're to have a hybrid policy, this is probably, as good a hybrid policy as you like. But I think the staff should understand that it's definitely probationary. It's definitely for very careful monitoring, and it will need to come back to the board to be reviewed in a suitable period, maybe 6 or 12 months, whatever Ian might think appropriate, with a report on how what its effects have been. Because I don't think it should be regarded as the norm going forward.
Daniel, it's good to have independent thoughts around the board table. Thank you for that. I'll come back to Ian on that. John, could I bring you in first?
I don't want to upset Daniel, but I almost agree with him. But
We're working
away from opposition to hybrid working. Obviously, there is some benefit in it. If I'm honest, my working style for the last 15, 20 years has been hybrid working anyway. So I can see some benefit in it if I'm doing it. My concern around it is we need, in management terms, to make sure that if there's only 40%, some of that can be on site. The reality is only 20% may be actually in the office. We need to make sure that the overlap of people on that 20% or 30% or the only 40% is what the policy says. You have enough people meeting around a coffee machine to actually have those conversations that have inspirational ideas and good ideas and understanding issues, but you don't do that remotely on screens. If you're working from home, you get isolated, and it is about actually understanding an area as much as anything else. That you can only have if you're talking to each other. Sometimes you're on a coffee machine, and you can't do that remotely. So, whilst I'm not anti it and I'm supporting it in my authority, it is on the proviso that people are in the office on a regular basis, and there is a definite crossover of people, so that people do link with each other, get better training that way, get crossover of fertilisation of ideas. And as long as the policy enables that, I have no problem with it. But I do worry about this charge down the hybrid working route, where people will progressively become more and more isolated, and it's not fruitful.
Thank you for that. Ian, I'm wondering whether we can implement this on a probationary 6-month period with a report to come back from you for how it's operated, you know, in practice, and any potential improvements to it or thoughts on it after that 6-month period.
Yeah, of course, happy to do that, Chair. I think, I mean, I absolutely agree with the points that have been made, particularly by John about. I think this is why we've taken a fairly considered approach to this over a period of time. We didn't want to rush into a new policy when the working environment was still uncertain, with COVID restrictions sort of popping in and out. What I mean, we've come at this very much from what does the organisation require to operate as efficiently and effectively as possible. And there are some efficiency benefits for the organisation to hybrid working. No doubt in my mind about that at all. But absolutely, there has to be balance with the points that John has made about the need to have people in the office and the benefits of that, sharing a coffee and that informal. And I have to say, the vast majority of staff absolutely recognise that themselves. And welcome and want to be in the office. But I think we also have to recognise that you know, COVID has enabled us to use technology in a way, and we need to use that efficiently, as effectively as well. So we've been striving here to get the right balance between those things. And yeah, we think this is the right approach. In some respects, the policy is needed to cover some of the sort of consequential aspects of working in that way. I think we would work in that way anyway. You know, unless we were literally going to say to people, you must all be in the office. There is no working from home whatsoever. So therefore you need a policy framework around that. For example, you know, how do you treat insurance issues? How do you treat health and safety when you're working away from the office? So there's a range of consequences, and that's why we formalised it in this way. We did contemplate not having one, a formal policy, but I think this is. But very happy to do as you say, Simon, and come back in 6 months' time and say how we think it's working and whether there's any improvements needed.
We implement it in a pilot for review after 6 months, and you report back to the board. People happy with that? Daniel, are you happy with that? Are you
happy for it to be tested? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Neil.
First comment and then 2 questions. Comment. I think if people are going to work on a hybrid basis, we need a policy, because we need to set out clearly what is expected of people.
Yeah.
And it's not only what's expected of people, but we also need to be concerned about their health and well-being. And this system of working can leave people lonely and without supervision or without assistance. And therefore it's important to have a policy that covers that and to recognise it. Yep. That's the comment. 2 questions. 1, in recent recruitment drives, have we found the ability to offer hybrid working is attractive to potential recruits? I.e., if we don't have it, are we going to put people off? And secondly, it says in the policy at 2.2 that the corporation believes that adopting hybrid working is beneficial to efficiency and productivity gains, and will also improve employee well-being. Easy to say. Do we have evidence of that? So 1's the recruitment, and 2 is evidence to support that statement.
Yeah, I'm happy to on the first one, Neil, about recruitment, and I was going to make this point generally anyway, but you've linked it to hybrid working, so I'll make it now. The employment market is tough at the moment, where you know there are challenges in recruiting staff. We've been out for a number of posts where we've had very few applicants, very little interest. So the market is tough anyway. And yes, I absolutely can categorically say that this now has become a factor for staff in considering moving. You know, they rightly potential staff are looking at working conditions and your total remuneration package, whether that's pension and holiday, etc., etc. But this now is right in there as well, and I can absolutely categorically tell you that is the case, because we've got a very live case at the moment where it's a factor. So I mean, in terms of your other point about efficiencies, I mean, I think you know, we haven't done a study of this, but I think we can all see anecdotally how certainly during periods of working from home during the lockdown periods, we probably initially thought it was all going to be quite inefficient, but actually it turned out to be far from the case. So as much, if not more, work was being done during that period, because you're spending less time traveling, you're spending, you know, less time moving to and from meetings. Trips up to London that I would have done, you know, would take half a day for an hour and a half's meeting. Well, I can get 3 of those in now in the morning. So there's definitely efficiency. But I think you have to balance that with John's point about the thing that you lose if you're wholly working from home, and that contact with people, the informal stuff. And some of that's about work, but also some of it's about well-being and just making connections with people, and just that conversation that you know, hear a little bit about what's going on in their life and picking issues up like that. So it is about getting the balance right. But I think I've been a skeptic. I like being in the office, and I know you all know why I'm not able to be in the office much at the moment, but I like being in the office. So but I think there's a right balance here to be had.
Yeah, I'll follow on that. I think that some evidence of it would be helpful, because Daniel raises some valid points, and we need to judge it on the evidence. And perhaps also, should we have in this policy some particular obligation on senior people being in the office, so that younger people and newly employed people have the ability to work with them, because it's often harder for the new recruits than it is for the established people who have their own established social and experiential capital, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it would, you could make an attempt at putting that into the policy. I wonder whether that might be quite tricky to mandate in a policy, but I've been very clear with the directors and line managers that they need to implement this, and they need their teams to be operating and to be picking up those sorts of issues, Neil. I mean, it's the line managers, it's the directors who are closest to those people that have to make those sorts of calls and to look after their staff and to make sure those staff are being supported. How easy it would be to write that into a policy, I'm not quite sure, but that's a very clear requirement from myself, that senior managers are working in that way.
All right, I think we've had a good conversation around this. We're embracing this, but with some caution. We look forward to an update of this interim arrangements after 6 months, and the way that it's operated in practice, and any modifications obviously to further enhance it for our employees and what we're looking to achieve here in the Development Corporation. So thank you very much for that, Joe. Thank you for your paper. I think everyone's happy with that, including Daniel, I think.
Yes.
Excellent. So that brings us to the end of the public part of our meeting. We've had, as always, some excellent questions from members of the public. Answers to those questions will be posted on our website after this part of the meeting concludes. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us, or for watching this, and we look forward to you joining us again in the near future. Have a good summer, everyone. Stay safe. Thank you.